Welcome, everybody, to week 4 of Silver Scraps. We've just come off of an exciting week 3 with a lot of really interesting matchups and results. Today, we're going to dive in and look at those results a little bit, and then we're going to spend the time after that talking about week 4 matchups, playoff implications, and some interesting storylines that we're starting to see develop. Thank you guys for joining us. It is the 14th of February, Valentine's Day.
Hey, text Happy
Recording this morning
Valentine's Day.
before.
Happy
Happy
Valentine's
Valentine's
Day,
to you,
everybody.
Decker. Not these other two. Fuck these other guys.
Just me and you. That's just us.
Leper, you could be my Valentine.
Here, you know what, Colonel? We have a so before we get too much into things, we've been doing a wager, right? When one of us on the show has a team playing another person on the show, another person on the team shows team. Words are hard.
Mhm.
We play this weekend, Revolution and MIT. So if we lose, I will do something Valentine's related for you. I'll figure maybe we can think about it towards the show, but that'll be my
I
wager.
think that's a good idea.
I like this.
I love this
Remember,
because
you're no longer my Valentine.
because my team is in a different group than all three of you. So it just I'm just like doing, like rubbing my hands together, just enjoying the chaos, and I'm just watching.
Free pass.
All right, well, with that, let's jump into things, guys. Week 3 was pretty exciting, and all things considered. We had some really close matchups. We had some matchups that weren't expected, right? We still have to see FTD and Subversive play.
It's Subversive Gaming, not Submersive Gaming, the underwater team.
Did someone say
wait
Submersive?
a second. Are there two teams?
No, there's one team. Some of the Goldcasters continue to say Subversive Gaming.
Oh, okay.
That's wonderful.
The underwater team.
I love that. But what I want to hear to you guys. What was the highlight match from last week?
I don't necessarily have a highlight match, but I just know that we're full of shit.
I mean, you're not wrong.
Wait. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
We've talked about.
Oh, we got all predictions wrong, basically.
We've
right?
got all our predictions wrong, and
Everything.
not only that, we've been pushing this idea that the void is going to be this. Yeah.
No,
we've
you
been
pushed
pushing-
it. I was against it last week. We can go check the tape.
Everyone but you.
And we can go back and check the tape.
Like,
I was
okay,
saying that
there's
you
multiple ones of us here, so therefore the use of the we applying multiple people is still an accurate statement.
Becker,
Yeah, okay,
I want you to
fair.
understand this is a team effort, and so we don't use you and I language. We use collective we language. Okay, so whatever we, as Colonel Leper and I decide, you're stuck with it.
You're
You're
stuck with
there.
I'm on board. We're full of shit. Let's do so.
The honest, the one for me, being real, even though TFU played without BotGod, was the fact that TFU dropped a game to Beyblades, and that the games looked that close without BotGod.
Yeah.
So I said last week that Beyblades is a team on the uptick. Like they made some good roster shuffles, and I think it's worked. I don't think it's obviously working out for them, but TFU showing that if they don't have BotGod, we've all scrimmed them or played them. BotGod's an incredible player, and minus BotGod, this team shows weakness. Their solo laners still had some good games, like Top Baller had a good game in game 3, I think, and then Young Rich Boy had. Game 1 and game 2 were stellar, and I think bot lane did pretty well, but it was pretty stable across the games. But no BotGod, and the team does not look nearly as dominant. So I'm interested.
Even more surprising for real though was VBU dropping a game to Abyssal.
Yes.
That was a huge loss. I don't think anyone expected this because now we're looking at VBU as battling for a second this week, and to drop game to Abyssal, who I think is winless in series, is worrying.
And how do you feel if you're Abyssal? I mean, you've got to feel a little better, right? About like losing doesn't feel good, right? But taking a game off of VBU has to feel like, okay, we're going in a direction at least, and not just like falling apart.
I absolutely agree. And the also thing, the other thing too is Abyssal Emerald has made some some roster moves since that game.
Oh yeah. Do you want to talk about the roster moves? I'm iffy on them.
So I'm not going to say that whether it's an upgrade or not. I've spoken with some of the people involved, and a lot of it's just personality kind of things. You get what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't necessarily know how the former Beyblade's mid laner going to support is going to improve the roster or not, right?
So I think what that was, correct me if I'm wrong, it was Beyblade support going to mid and then going to another team back to support. I thought. Am I not on part? That's CCG IHF, is that right?
Yeah, it might be something like that.
Yeah, so from because I feel like I remember when we scrimmed them during the off season, IHF was on support, and then I was surprised whenever they were playing mid. And I mean their mid was pretty shaky. I mean that's the set that we've won this split so far, and it was a lot through just mid lane stomping. And so I was pretty happy to see IHF back on the support role, even if it's on a different team. I think that's where they're going to shine the most personally.
And that this may be a positive. It may not be. Who knows? But since that, it's always interesting to me when we see a team that is starting to find success in some ways, then have roster changes.
Mm-hmm.
This is about Beyblades, right?
No, this is about Abyssal.
Abyssal, I'm sorry.
They just took a game off of VBU,
Yep,
and then changed their roster.
Yes.
That's wildly interesting. And so one of the things that's to talk about the VBU side a little bit, right? So Colonel, you talked about this last week. It's kind of a similar story with VBU,
The exact same
right?
story, actually.
Having success, making a major roster change, and they had a bit of a snafu in the middle of their series where they swapped out their support. They were drafting. It was interesting draft choices. I was seeing Sona in the first two games when Seraphine is up is odd.
Weird. Just weird.
And I think they got punished for it, right? Like the Sona did not have good games, and they made a roster shift, and they ended up pulling it out with the Swain support. And I'm not pinning everything on the support. I'm just saying the roster volatility, and then even champ pool stuff, and like all this stuff is very interesting given the roster changes that have been happening leading into this week during the series, and then going forward with Abyssal. Kind of maybe are they going to have the same kind of issues?
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
I think the big thing is I don't pin any of that on the support. To be honest, I pin it on the organization and coaching staff and the infrastructure around this team because that's their job to minimize potential roster volatility. And VBU, in my head, I believe they probably have a bigger level of infrastructure to protect against stuff like this, but they didn't do what we could have hoped they were going to do, right? Like the roster volatility led to, I mean, nobody expects them to lose this game. And now on Abyssal's side, they have the chance to show that on an organizational standpoint, they have a better backing to help their team take this in stride and not lose footing and potentially even take the momentum from winning a game and do good things with it. So I'm excited to see what Abyssal can do with this roster change. Although it is in a pessimistic light, right? Like I don't like teams changing their rosters after you find success. I don't.
Right.
I didn't like it with VBU. I didn't like it with Abyssal. But if Abyssal can take it
is
better,
not a good sign.
Yes, if Abyssal can take it better, then maybe we could see them starting to take some games, especially as they're going into a really important matchup this week.
Yeah, and what's the high point for you guys? I mean, like, I know that T1 had a really like outstanding set, right? I mean, they look like they absolutely dominated. It's at least in the bot lane. So these teams that don't play we've talked about it last week. These teams that don't play those strong bot laners and more play through their solos. Maybe Abyssal finds some wins by punishing those types of teams. I mean, we'll see as it goes on.
I am interested to see with the pistol swap. So they're moving. From what I understand, they're moving their mid lane to support. Is that right? That
No,
could be
they,
interesting.
they picked up a new support.
New support.
They picked up a new support. I'm sorry.
New support.
Yeah,
I
IHF, who was the mid lane for Beyblades.
Yep, that's where
went
my
to
confusion
Abyssal
came in.
and
I
is
apologize.
now playing support.
Yes.
I blame Sunday morning sleepy starts. But it'll be interesting to see what that tempo change looks like.
Speaking of organizational issues, any particular reason that Revolution and Crosspoint was this close?
That's a really good question. I don't know. It shouldn't have been.
I don't know. It's growing for Revolution is continuing to grow, so stepping in as as a director of Revolution, right? We're continuing to grow. I'm really happy that they went down and came back, right? They just, I think from what I saw, the Nasus game was just hitting them with a wallet for a while. But Revolution is a good team. They're going to be a better team, but they have the potential to drop a game to anybody. And I think that showed a little bit. But also, I don't want to rag on Revolution because they're my team. I believe in them. But I'm trying to be realistic. I want to talk a little bit about Crosspoint, where they showed competition. They showed some life.
Oh yeah.
I was going to say, I think they honestly, I can't tell how much of this is Revolution's fault and how much of it is Crosspoint coming up and really exceeding expectations. I think a lot of different points on the Crosspoint roster surprised me.
They definitely have done better than I expected.
It's and honestly, it's a result that we expected, right? 2-0 Revolution beats Crosspoint. That's not a lot. There's nothing crazy to talk about. I think going next week, right? This might be a good thing to talk about it as a transition almost. Is before obviously we have to talk about MIT, big game. But Crosspoint versus Subversive next week. These are two teams that have shown life against teams that they've been 2-0'd by. These are teams that are winless. And it's going to be interesting if they can ride the success that they saw this week, Crosspoint, into that matchup against Subversive, who've been honestly performing better than Crosspoint from what I've seen in the group. Let's talk about MIT real quick.
So technically, if we want to get technical, there are no undefeated teams left.
Yes.
Yes, as far as
in
game losses,
there are none.
Every team has lost games.
Isn't that great? By the way, can we just take a moment to appreciate that? Like that's
yes. There's no more winless teams.
Losses.
Also,
makes it hard to predict anything.
Yeah. But I think the biggest thing that was obvious to me in this win is that Arc leans very heavily on Captain Ryu finding success. I think Crockpot shown himself not only as the better top laner in this matchup, but I think arguably the best top in IBS. And that's the kind of roster that Arc is going to have their hardest battles because Captain Ryu means so much to this roster in finding any success.
I would agree with that. It's similar to watching Arc in the way that for a lot of us that have scrimmed TFU, where a lot of the way that Arc plays is around letting their carry do things and not getting in the way. So when that carry isn't enabled or isn't able to get the leads that they are used to, the team kind of is unsure of what needs to happen.
Exactly.
Yes. It's I think some of the big we talked a little bit beforehand, obviously top as the linchpin for this team. Do they have other tools in their toolbox to make up for that going forward, right? How do they learn and how they adapt? Is their mid lane?
That was my thing. I think Phoenix is actually a really point of stability for their team. I mean, so looking back at this game versus MIT, you look and he was a 1-5-5 on a Lysandra pick that wasn't Lissandra, in my mind, is both not great in the meta right now and also just not forgiving. You know, it's like one of those champions where she's almost a melee, and like playing when you're going from playing like Lux Veigar and then to playing something like Lissandra, it's just a complete flip of how you need to be thinking. But that you saw the games 2 and 3 where Phoenix, I thought Phoenix was going to be able to carry them in game 3. Personally, I thought that maybe Phoenix was playing really well. I mean, playing Veigar twice, you know, he was or they were a very good tool for their team. So I think that Phoenix can be a point. Their bot lane, I still have question marks, even though on their win, their bot lane did perform pretty well. The Rel pick was decently impactful in game 3, a lot less so. Like, it looked like a completely different player from game 2 to game 3 as far as the Rel was concerned. But Phoenix will have to be that person, because I don't think that this is a team that can play through bot. And I'm starting to feel, I was feeling pretty good about 6 foot Max as far as a middle of the pack jungler. I'm starting to get kind of, I feel like Bird Nurse kind of gapped him in these games as far as just having pressure on the map.
That's the way I feel. I guess the way I would say it is, it's like the rest of the team is really kind of good at punishing greed, is the way that I would say it, right? That they're just kind of going and making, particularly Phoenix and Maximus, right? Where they're not looking for opportunities, but they're going to take them. And because of the way that they play, people will make mistakes in an effort to punish them, if that makes sense. And that, I think, is a lot of where things happen for Arc, is Captain Rio, just watching him play, is making opportunities, right?
Mm-hmm.
He is going and trying to catapult himself forward. And the rest of the team is waiting
for him to pop off.
They're waiting for him to pop off, but they're also waiting for their lane opponent to make a mistake, trying to punish them.
Let's briefly look at last night's match, CBR versus GSG, and use that as our jumping off point to talk about week 4. So last night, CB rookies took Goon Squad Gaming Alpha, right? Yes.
Correct. Yes, correct.
They took them down 2-0. But from what I understand, it's a fairly competitive match, all things considered.
Yeah, so we weren't streaming it, but I've watched the game, so they were competitive. I mean, it was a back and forth fight, and CB just played. I mean, they probably played the best that I've seen them play this split. So
that's promising.
Yeah,
right?
It is promising.
This is one of the teams that I've personally been not very confident in. I've been wanting them to show up, and this is one of the weeks. Week 3 was the one. Week 3, week 4 are kind of the weeks where I'm like, I want to see these guys really step into the competition. And
this was
what would you say
an important
was the
match.
high point for them?
So I would say so first of all, they're top laner. So they had an E-sub mid this week. Pitiful Jr. came in from VBU and played mid for them, and played very well. He played. They played Galio both games, and were force. I mean, Galio is just hard to deal with in IBS, I think. But the top laner for this team, whose name is escaping me, I'm looking for it real quick.
It's Chef Boy.
Chef Boy. Yeah, is that Bob? Right? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely popped off. I mean, he literally 1v9 the first game on Mordekaiser. Even like the lane went even and or went pretty volatilely back and forth, and then Mordekaiser just walked out and bopped everybody. And then in game two was less of a convincing top 1v9, and it was more of just a team effort. But it was honestly, it was one of those where I wish that we would have been able to stream it, because it was just a really close back and forth game that, if you look at the gold graphs, were just kind of.
Both of these games were 40 minutes plus, and you're saying that top lane 1v9 in game 1, it still was a 44-minute game.
Yeah. And most of the times when you see 40-minute games in IBS, it's a lot of times it can be one team has a significant lead and they just don't know how to close the game out, right? I think that's a common thing.
Yeah.
But this game was honestly so back and forth. It was drawn out because it was close, not because one team couldn't close it out. It was basically, all right, we both have 3 dragons now. It's 40 minutes into the game. We're gonna team fight for soul, and then whoever wins this is gonna take Baron and then walk it down mid and in the game. And that, and then CB just kind of came out in those team fights ahead of us. But it was a really, really close and good series, and shows a lot of potential for CB. So I'm excited for them.
So it's honestly one of the more exciting 2-0s that we've had in a while. I want to take a chance to throw it to Colonel here and use this as a transition, right? So with CBR now sitting at 2-1 and GSG at 1-2, let's talk about playoff implications going into the week 4 matchups. Let's start talking about week 4.
So the two biggest things are, there's one positive and one negative from that specific game in week 3, right? So the first one being the positive one, CB Rookies has catapulted themselves from a question mark. We weren't sure who was going to really make it into the playoff race to competing for second place. Their week 4 matchup this week will decide who sits second place alone behind Fallen. And on the side of Goon Squad and Beyblades now are tied at 5 points in the Void division. One of them will not make it to playoffs. And considering how big we expected both of those teams to be, how many differences we've seen from how they've played versus our expectations, that's a really big deal.
Yes. I want to talk a little bit about the CBR VBU matchup. So these are two teams that have seen similar issues across the season in terms of having high expectations and not necessarily meeting those expectations in the early third of the season, but they both reacted to those differently, right? We've seen VBU with roster shifts both within a series and between matches, between weeks, remain fairly stable, and they're starting to show some life. They've been showing life, but they're really starting to solidify that consistency in performance, pulling out these tough two victories against GSU last night. What are your guys' thoughts about this matchup, CBR versus VBU?
Well, it's an interesting one to me because you've got similar things with differences, right? You've got top laners that are either hot or not. You've got reliable, steady AD carries. You've got some differences in jungle, right? Where we can make more comparisons between Yasuo only and Swag Money Boy versus Little Rodney and Timic, if that makes sense, right? Like one half is the more control oriented, where the other one is the more pop off oriented. So I think a lot of it comes down to, with what we've seen, which team is going to maintain their stability. Because when these teams lose, they tend to lose very dramatically and very, very rapidly and stay there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's less about skill, because skill-wise, and I'm sure that some people, and particularly on one side, are going to disagree with me on this one, but the skill gap isn't that intense between these two. Where it favors one team in one area, it's going to favor the other in the other area, kind of thing to me. So I think a lot of it is whichever team is able to, one, make winning as painful as possible for the other team.
That's a great way to put it.
And then is able to maintain going forward. If I'm going to predict this series, I think whoever wins game 1 is going to lose the series.
If I could bounce off of that, I think the players that we need to watch on both teams and in this matchup just in general, is gonna be the people that aren't nearly as volatile, right? I think CB Rookie's bot lane had a really good series last week.
Yes.
I think it was something like 13-2 and 10, 13-2, 12, something on Kai'Sa for Brave X. And they've never really been the reason to lose. And
they're the most stable part of that roster.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm gonna say though that Samira game that they played in game 1 has me going, I don't know.
I agree.
The answer is just don't play Samira.
When you look at the rest of their losses, like 1-4 and 5 with Samira, and that's their bad game. You know,
well,
like,
I'm more looking at
famine
you're looking at it on Battlefy, right? The bigger, more important thing to me for that one is how little of an impact that they had in that, right? They didn't even do 10% of overall team damage.
Mm-hmm. I think that's more so to be expected if you get behind in Samira. Like, Samira is probably the biggest feast or famine champ in the bot lane. But at the same time, if that's their bad game,
right?
CB Rookies has not been complete rockstars the whole time, right? They've had their struggles, and if that's the bot lane's bad game, I think it's fair to say that they are probably the most consistent. And across the rift for VBU, like, their bot lane has been a force to be reckoned with. They've been a reason to win a lot of their games. And I think I would be looking at the bot lane for this matchup as the linchpin to see who's going to be taking the series.
And I would agree with that. I can agree with that entirely.
Let's talk. Decker, do you have any thoughts? I have a question to move us a little further along, but I want to make sure you get your thoughts in there.
Yeah, so I think from last night and from watching CB Rookies is their bot lane plays a lot of the same ways that a lot of other bot lanes in IBS play, is that they just play the lane super passively and just wait till team fights and start hitting stuff. You know, and I think not to throw any shade at that. I mean, that's a perfectly fine way to play the game. I mean, I think it's probably the better strategy to take less risks in the bot side, since it's so punishable by having more people down there and waiting to play for team fights. But I'm interested to see if the more aggressive side of VBU's bot lane can make them take fights and see if they can just gap them in laning phase. I don't see. I'm never confident in seeing IBS teams like bot lanes play for laning phase, but I think that VBU is the counter to that. If it feels like from watching them play the couple of games that I've seen them, their bot lane takes a lot more risky trades and a lot more all-ins than most other IBS teams do. So I've got VBU in this, and everyone can see kind of our predictions. I think most of us have VBU.
I think all your predictions are wrong.
Except for Colonel.
They are BS.
And here's the thing. I think that a 2-0, I wish we could like say 2-0 but close. You know, like I think because I don't think that it's going to be you see 2-0s across the board except for Colonel, and you're like, oh, like we think they're going to get smashed. I don't have any thought that they're going to get smashed. I think it's going to be a great series.
I agree with you entirely. I think this is a very close series.
My prediction. I think it's going to be VBU
2-1.
2-1, not 2-0.
So we've only had
just change it one more game loss.
We've only had we've had 3 2-1s so far in the entire 2 2-1s.
Yeah, not a lot.
And most of them came from this last weekend, didn't they?
One happened in week 1. One happened in week 1 with VBU and Fallen. I know that.
Right.
And then MIT has had one. Not MIT. MIT
TFU
had one.
had 2 2-1s. VBU has had
one.
So VBU and TFU, okay, have had more games go to 3 than anyone else.
Yes, this is true.
Rev has had. How many has Rev had?
Rev has had one.
Okay, 2-1s.
Beyblades has had 1.
That's why it's hard for me to predict 2-1s. I think 2-1s are super rare in IBS more than anywhere else.
So for myself, the language I'm using with the 2-1 is less Yes, I think it might go 2-1, but I think it's more to the point of like they're going to be a close series.
I'm looking at your predictions now. You have 2-1 in every category for both.
Yes, I do.
For both divisions. Yes, 2-1 every time.
I really, really think though, and this is for me, and this is I'm going to go out there and people can tell me that I'm an idiot and I really don't care. I really think that whoever wins it's going to go to 3 games, and whoever wins game 1 is going to lose.
The reverse
Whoever
sweep
wins game 1 is going to lose.
Because the other one wins game 2, and then mental booms for game 3.
Right. Or that what I have seen happen with teams that struggle like this is that when they're met with resistance, right, that they have a harder time. You get what I mean? That their confidence is shook. It's something I have seen not super often, but it's more frequent than you would expect with high confidence level teams, right? Where when they lose, especially if it's or when they win, but particularly if it is not one-sided in their favor, that they struggle in future games because they're trying to get back to that high of stomping. So a weird example of this, right, is back in spring 2020 in Gold playoffs.
Yes.
Astro, I don't remember what Astro edition it was, versus late stage or early stage capitalism. Astro FF'd game 1. And it threw off early stage capitalism's entire mental so that the other 2 games were absolute stomps.
This is true. That was also probably the biggest shocker I've seen. I never thought FFing would be that good for a team. But
but that's my example here. It's like I think that game 1 is going to be close, but that the team that wins is going to be worse off mentally.
That's such an interesting approach. It makes sense to me, and I'm very curious to see how it goes.
I could be completely full of shit because I usually.
There's a pretty good chance you are, but I feel like it's happened enough times that you can't really consider it just coincidental.
There's a non-zero chance that this is what happens. Now, I do want to make sure that we move on to the rest of the Void here before we jump into Shadow Isles. So, the Void has 2 interesting matchups between a winless team, or that involve a winless team and a lossless team in terms of match score. So, Abyssal versus Beyblades and GSG versus the Fallen. Now, there's some, Colonel touched on a little bit, there's some pretty big playoff implications, I think, going forward after this week for GSG and Beyblades. And Beyblades kind of have, like, at least from a tempo perspective, they have the chance to really ride a high into a playoff spot. They got the easiest matchup that they're going to get. They've competed with the toughest teams. They've taken a game off of TFU. They took a match off of CBR. And GSG lost to CBR. And GSG is now what is GSG going to do against the Fallen? This is at this point after the last 2 weeks, it could be a really big deciding factor for our anime protagonists. I want to hear everyone's thoughts on that though. What's the playoff picture like?
From my perspective right now, the one thing that GSG does have is that we have a win over Beyblades in week 1, so that that's very helpful going into that. Competing for that spot for playoffs. And I also I want to say, not to take away Beyblade's game off of Fallen, but I think all of us can agree that a Fallen University minus Bot God is a very different team. Very different team. I think a Fallen University, not because they didn't have Bot God last week versus Beyblades. And I want to say, again, I'm a Beyblades believer. I think I've said for the 2 weeks now, I think they are on the rise and they're going to be competing for playoffs very hard. But it's going to be interesting to see when that matchup comes back around, because I still believe in GSG's ability to take games off of Abyssal, and take the set versus Abyssal, even though we had a rough match against CB Rookies. So that rematch between Beyblades and GSG coming in the second round robin, to me, is going to be I mean, it's going to be defining, right, for which one of those teams is going to get that spot. So I don't think
Yeah,
that
I think-
Beyblade should have a hard time tonight, and they should probably continue that momentum going forward.
I think there's a chance that they do. I think
Really?
Beyblades, yes. I think Abyssal had their best showing, although
that's true. That's true.
again, big sad that let's change our roster after we find success has happened once more. But if they can ride that momentum and take Beyblades to 3 games, I think they actually have a good chance of pulling out that series. And I think if they do, all of a sudden the last spot for playoffs becomes so open if Abyssal can prove competitive against Beyblades.
So I have 2 words to say to this, and that is Kled mid.
I'm sorry, Leopard. Could you say that one more time?
I said Kled mid.
Okay, so now can you explain why the fuck
Yeah.
you said that?
No.
Okay.
Just gonna leave that. Just gonna leave that out
The
in the
answer
universe.
though is only Magical Girls played a game of Kled mid.
And it made me really happy as a Kled fan, but I mean, it didn't look bad. I think it went like 9-9 and 9, 9-9 and 10, and something like that.
It was fine. It looked fine.
Yeah.
It was.
It looked fine. It
What
looked
was the
fine.
matchup
like?
And it's just all I'm trying to get at here is I think that there is things on Abyssal that are going to test Beyblades.
Yes, that makes sense.
Especially from a draft perspective, if you don't, even if you expect that coming, it's still not exactly something that you think about,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
The spice might be Abyssal's way to victory.
And
Right.
T1's forehead is coming into their fucking own here.
Very strong AD carry. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I've been
we've
very
talked a
surprised
lot.
by this
We've
one.
been talked a lot about Jason KB23, but T1's forehead sleeper OP.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I'm wondering if obviously they weren't comfortable or weren't clicking in the support match or the support AD carry matchup, which is why they made a change. I'm guessing. Obviously, I don't know. There might have been some drama that
Right.
I don't know about, but bringing in a new support, I think that IHF is. I think that they had a rough time as a mid laner, and I'm excited that they're going back to support. I think they were a good support. So seeing that pair is I know Colonel really hates good thing happens, change your roster, but
Oh my God, so annoying.
For this instance, I'm for it. Like I'm on board. I don't think that Grim is it Grim Lobo? That's right. Is that correct? Was so integral to their team having success, which they've had very little of, but they've had some. So I making a change there, maybe it's going to give some life into their roster, and we'll see some more competitive.
Well,
games
their
from them.
old support was Yami,
Oh, that's right. That's right.
and I thought Yami was one of their best performers. Don't know if, she's now a sub on our roster, so news is out there that we saw that and scooped it, because I think that Yami's been performing really well. It's like, yes, I agree that there was a meshing problem, but if I would have preferred it needing to take out literally anybody else.
Mhm.
I think that it'll be a big test this week to see if T1's forehead still performs, but I think that Yemi had a lot to do with his success. And that's going to be a big problem if that's the case, if T1 doesn't perform now that he's with a new support.
I think Yami's a good player too. The thing is though that they didn't have a lot of success with that setup, and their first kind of spark of success came after that change, right?
Yeah.
So I mean,
No, before.
It came before that change.
They played what I'm looking at their match versus.
Oh, they played with Grim Lobo, but
Yeah.
still, like it.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But that was like a point of highlight for them, right? That match going to 3 games there.
Yeah.
So anyway, we can move forward.
Let's talk a little bit about let's jump across the void. So Shadow Isles and the void? What separates the two? Let's hop across the pond.
So this is where we're at, right? Both divisions have an undefeated team, MIT and TFU.
Mhm.
However,
Which side has the best winless team? That's my question.
Well, this is where we're getting there. Is Shadow Isles has 2 winless teams.
Yes.
Not for long.
Void has
Not
one.
Not for long.
Oh shit!
That
Go.
changes today, but
Yes.
so let's talk about that one.
Yeah.
'Cause
Let's talk about that.
I
That's
think,
big.
at least from this show perspective, Subversive versus Crosspoint, I'm really excited for.
I am too. Yeah, this is going to be a great match.
This the
So you guys want to tell me why Subversive is going to win, since all of you
extremely
picked Subversive?
Snowy Faye.
I was gonna say roll in.
That's a good argument.
I think so. I think it's going to be competitive. I think Crosspoint is showing that they can play the game. They can play the game at the same caliber as the rest of the Shadow Isles, at least in the mid. Like they can toe the line. I don't think they're good enough to take a full match. And like they stepped up game 1 in week 3 against Revolution, and that's big, right? Revolution is growing. Revolution's getting stronger. And then to try to step up and match that, that's pretty big. They still didn't pull out the win. They lost 2-0. They are 0-3, and I am not. I've seen Subversive. I feel has been growing as well. So I think they take a full game, but I think it still ends up 2-1 in favor of Subversive,
So
with the strength of the roster across the board.
The key matchup here, the key matchup to me in this is mid lane.
Yes.
You stole my
I agree
point. You
wholeheartedly.
stole my point.
Sorry.
That's okay. I forgive you.
Okay.
So Leper, why do you think that mid is so important?
No,
for this match?
it's Decker's point. Decker can explain that.
Oh, wait. Okay, fine. I just we were questioning again. Ghost Zero Pants, Ghost No Pants. I don't know what to call them.
Ghost. I'm just calling him Ghost.
I'm gonna go with Ghost.
Or
also.
Pants. I'm gonna call him Pants. I think
Pants
that's
is better. Pants is better. Because the pants is the subject. The ghost is a descriptor of the pants, right? They are ghost
Exactly.
pants.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So pants. So pants had.
Oh, let's go. Get past this part.
Pants had one of their best weeks this week.
100%.
Against Rev, I don't think of Lynx as a top mid laner yet. I still think that Lynx is coming into that role, but is not quite there yet. So I don't think that Ghost was challenged as hard as they have been in the past. But I saw life from Ghost, the Orianna game, the Annie game. Pants. His name is Pants, or their name is Pants. But I think that it's going to come through King of Brawl and Pants. I think that King of Brawl is a really they've been volatile this split, but I think there's a lot of potential there. I think Colonel, you've talked about that too, that you think that King of Brawl is actually a good jungler.
Absolutely.
So when I'm looking at it, I'm looking at mid and jungle, and I think that combo can get us Crosspoint this win. I don't think it's guaranteed. I've got Crosspoint winning on my predictions because I think that will happen. I don't think it's going to be a stomp, and I can definitely see it going the other way. But I believe in Pants is what I'm saying. I trust in
it
Pants.
from the other end, right? I have a lot of faith in Snowy Faye. I've got a lot of faith in Shadowfax. I've got a lot of faith in Roland, right? To me, Tukamis Prime, or if we're going by Pants, Mr. Prime here. Prime is having the hardest time on SG.
Yes.
And so, given the success we're seeing from Pants, I'm concerned about how much that match impacts the rest of the map. Because there's definitely clear high points on SG that I have over Crosspoint. And that's overall why I'm having them winning 2-0.
I have them up for different reasons. I think your biggest reason was Snowy Faye. He's been performing so well. But I think Subversive, very similarly to Arc, have a top laner that is a make or break. I feel like while Snowy Faye looks disgusting, when Subversive as a team finds success is when Roland has success. And I think Roland, although he's on a winless team, has been one of the best performers on a winless team, I think, in all of IBS. I think he's been performing really, really well. We've also scrimmed them, and I think Roland was their best performer. And I think for the reason why I put Subversive winning this game is because I don't know if I think the mid 2v2 for Crosspoint is better, but I don't think that can overcome the fact that the bot lane and the top lane are both pretty heavily in Subversive's favor in my mind.
So all in all, I want to ask one quick question, and then let's move on to the last two Shadow Isles matchups before we talk about predictions. So we have SG, we have Crosspoint, and we have Abyssal, all winless teams that are all starting to show life, which is one of the really exciting parts of this. And there's a chance that we come out of this with only one winless team left after this week. I want to hear what you guys have to say. If you were like 1, 2, 3, what's the best winless team right now in IBS?
Subversive.
Okay. And then between CPK and Abyssal, where do those guys line up?
Ooh.
That's a really good question.
I would rank them, for me, doing it really quick, not having thought about it too much. It's SG, Abyssal, Crosspoint.
I feel like I'm probably somewhere near there, but I might swap it considering I'm not the biggest fan of the roster changes that Abyssal has had. I feel like a week ago I would have said that, and now I think Crosspoint, who I believe is on the up and up, I think might be the second below Subversive there.
All of this points to the fact that we need to have the GSG mid-season classic.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's in the works. We will hopefully have some solid information about that in the next week. So be looking out for that.
I'm excited to hear about it. But what I also am excited about is my personal highlight of the week: MIT versus Revolution. It's a show match to me. It's a fight between two organizations that have a tight history. MIT's been around for a hot minute. Revolution is new, born from players, veterans of MIT, and it's an opportunity for like a team that's MIT has come out swinging this season. Right, 3 weeks in, they are definitively the best team in their group, probably the best team in IBS from where I'm sitting. They showed some cracks against what was the second best team in the group, but really nothing severe, right? Just a few things. They're looking solid. Revolution is a team that's been trending upwards, but it's still kind of an unknown. And this is going to be the biggest test that they're going to have. And there's a bit of, to me, to hype it up a little bit, there's a bit of a grudge match.
So now that you're done with your masturbation, let me tell you why Revolution is going to win this series.
Revolution winning. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, talk us through the hunger, Leopard.
So the reason that Revolution is going to win today is because they won't reschedule and MIT doesn't have a jungler.
This is true. We don't have a jungler. We requested a reschedule because our jungle and sub jungle, regardless of our 10-man roster, Links and Banter, we don't have a jungler here for tonight. So yeah, please reschedule.
I guess we don't as of recording this, it's around 12 EST on Sunday.
Yep.
We do not know if there's going to be a reschedule or not. But if there's not a reschedule, it might get spicy, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
That's why. And I don't mean this. Okay. And I'll break it down even more, right? Bird Nurse and Freddy One are incredibly good junglers, right?
Oh yeah.
They
top tier.
They drive MIT forward, right? They are in the right place. They are at the right time. They are punishing. They are preventing the other team from getting a foothold in the game. That's what, for both of them, what their strength is. So to have laners, even assuming, right, that you put somebody like, and I'm just going to make it an example here, CS Loves Whales, Thievery, into the jungle, right? And rely on the fact that our laners, Chinese Spy, Crockpot, Killistera, are really, really good, even in isolation. The fact that they're used to Bird Nurse or Freddy One showing up at the right time and then suddenly not having that will throw off teams.
I just want to point out, you make me very happy, Leopard, because regardless of having no junglers, you still have us winning a game, which just warms my heart just a little bit.
I mean, assuming that Revolution doesn't build a bunch of tanks and you don't pick Xayah.
So here's my problem with this matchup. So
that being said, if this game gets rescheduled, I'm MIT too.
Mm-hmm. I think, assuming the reschedule, assuming both teams are at equal strength, I just think the direct head-to-heads are so MIT favored, right? Like Captain Ryu on one of the second best teams, tied for second, who we talked about as this linchpin for the roster, right? We talked about their driving force, and he just couldn't win against Crockbot. I think Crockbot has been such a ridiculously good player, and now it's going to be relatively the same story for me. I think Captain Ryu was this best player on Arc. Look down at Revolution. Denobi is someone we know as being one of their best performers, and their success has to have Denobi a part of it. They do not find success if Denobi is not a part of it. And that's a problem when Crockpot just showed last week that that's where he thrives. And that's where Denobi, if he's going to get stomped, that's going to be a very quick 2-0.
As a fellow top laner and having played Denobi and just watched I've played Denobi and I've played Crockpot, and I got kind of destroyed by both of them.
I appreciate the honesty.
And I'm going to play Captain Ryu today. Okay, so I don't have that perspective. What I will say is this. Watching Crockpot versus Captain Ryu gave Crockpot a hell of a lot more opportunities than Denobi will. Denobi is very, very good at forcing bad backs, at taking advantage of small little wave things that Captain Ryu does not do. In fact, I would argue from my perspective, and I think Revolution and Arc have played, have they not?
No.
They haven't. I would argue that based on what I saw from Crockpot versus Captain Ryu, that Denobi is going to have an easier time with Captain Ryu than Crockpot, based on the way that they play. Now, all of that being said, and that's just the top lane matchup, I think that every other place on the map, except AD Carry, favors MIT by a pretty decent margin.
So I want to jump off that a little bit here. It's going to be entirely predicated on Chinese Spy. So I'm assuming reschedule. I'm assuming full strength rosters versus full strength rosters, right? Mm-hmm. We have seen all season long that the bot lane for Revolution can absorb and will maintain CS with their opposing lane, even if they're getting stomped. They will be valuable and impactful in the game if they're in a losing situation. We've seen General Denobi just neutralize threats topside, right, to Leopard's perspective. I'm not saying that it's favoring Revolution. I'm saying that it's going to be very competitive and on a knife's edge in the top and bot side of the map. And I think the big thing that we've been talking about a little bit is the jungle and the mid. We have this insane carry mid laner with Chinese Spy, and we have a supportive mid laner in Lynx. And we have still being proven talent in the jungle with Ziliak, who likes to make plays, who can play that carry role. And then you've got the high impact junglers from MIT. That jungle mid duo, as you know, Decker preaches almost all the time, is going to be huge for this series. And I think as long as that's assuming like statistically that the other two lanes kind of ride the knife's edge, right? But because it's a knife's edge, there's a chance that things tip really hard one way. Mm-hmm. There's a chance that the MIT bot lane just runs it over, or there's a chance that that Fueled by Self-Hate and the Spanx, they run with it, right? It's gonna
No,
be. I'm really
they
excited
won't.
about that.
They won't. You're forgetting the most important person on MIT here. And the reason that I do not view that bot lane as equal, and that's Shadow Stealer.
Yeah,
I do not think
disgusting.
in any way that Spanx, if I'll put it as in this kind of blunt way, right? If Nerf Snugglebutt and Chubby Chernobyl are struggling against Killistera because of Shadow Stealer, fueled by self-hate, and Spanx certainly will be.
Mm-hmm. I think
Okay, fair enough. That makes sense, given that those are Snugglebutt and Chubby are two of the best bot lane players. Like they're one of the best duos.
And
in the league.
it goes
And
into this mode, right? And and this is also why I get back to the jungle is super important, right? Because Killistera and Shadow Stealer are very much we are going to sit here until you give us an opportunity to punish, and we are going to punish hard. And they bring Bird Nurse into that very, very well. I really genuinely feel that the only place that this matchup is close is in top lane.
Yeah, I agree. I think,
and it's not in it. And I want to make this clear: in isolation between Killistera and Spanx, I'm favoring Spanx, right? But when we factor the supports into it, that's what throws the matchup off.
I always love to see a good support lineup. Gets me going. Go ahead, Colonel.
I think that while we're talking about a lot of things going into it, I think the more interesting thing is going to be coming out of it, right? I think this, in my head, pretty definitively decides best top laner in IBS, right? Like, Denobi has such high expectations. Crockpot has been stomping people with high expectations. I think whoever's winning this top lane matchup, I feel like it's hard to argue is not the best top laner, at least in this group, potentially in all of IBS.
The competition, the only competition, I would say, based on the way that the season has gone, to that is CBR.
Yes, I would agree with that.
That's totally fair.
I think the second round robin is going to be
the second round robin is going to be nuts.
Yeah, I think that just in general, this matchup is going to tell us a lot about top one, top two in the role, and it's also going to, on the bottom end of the spectrum, it's going to tell us where people who we have fallen below expectations and see how they fare. Like, I think it's not crazy to say that Lynx has been struggling in the mid lane, and now he's up against arguably the best mid laner in the league. If he can diffuse that matchup, Revolution has a great chance to make this a close series, and B, he makes a great argument for himself as being a mid laner that, while is in a supportive style, can hold his own. And I think the same thing is going to go for Killistera. If Killistera stomps this matchup with, I mean, we'll see if she'll even have Shadow Stealer in the support next to her, if depending on if it gets rescheduled. But we'll be trying to defy expectations against Spanx after, I mean, what was an arguably tough game last week. So I think more so against looking at what we're expecting going in, I'm looking at what kind of expectations we can have coming out, depending on the winner.
Let's talk about, well, Decker, do you have any thoughts before we move on?
No, I think that I would just be reiterating if this is all super valid.
Let's talk about ARC versus FTD. So this is, ARC came in, kind of silently won we're pretty silently a top team. They had their biggest showing of the season against MIT. They were competitive, but they were very clearly a step below MIT. On the other side, we have FTD, came in strong favorites in their group, and we've only seen 2 weeks from them, and they won. They're 1-1. They had to reschedule. What are you guys feeling about this matchup? What sticks out to you as critical here?
Well, we don't have more information from FTD because the food service business and Super Bowl don't mix with playing IBS on Sundays.
Fair enough.
Fair enough.
I think to be blunt about it, I think a lot of this game comes down to how badly does Leper int.
So my perspective is that this is a solo laners. This is about solo laners to me.
Oh yeah.
Like Captain Ryu needs to like define himself as like a top laner in this match, I think, and then Phoenix needs to solidify themselves, against what is I mean Vinny is a good, I think, a solid higher than average mid laner in this group, and it's going to come down to just solo lanes, and then it's where the jungler can choose to play. FTD, I've talked about it before, has one of the unique team setups where they can play through bot, and everyone can just sort of, the solo laners can just chill, and FTD is allowed to let their bot lane get ahead. This is art. Excuse me. So it'll be interesting to see where the pressure comes from the junglers. If there's a lot of stress put on the solo lane matchups, or if we'll see like the continued of the bot lane of just Nerf and Chubby trying to run over the duo.
If I could hop in, I think this might be a weird way to compare teams, but they've both played against MIT. They both played against the top of the group, so I think it's easy to compare them both based on their performance against that bar that everyone's trying to get over. So looking at, I also do believe that this is a game of solo laners. But I think looking at how the solo laners of both fared against MIT, I mean, Chinese Spy, talking to him personally, has rated Vinny as the second mid, not only in this group, but in the league. So I think mid lane, I think, is pretty Feed the Dream favored. But then on the opposite side of the spectrum, I think while Crockpot beat both Leper and Captain Ryu, I think Captain Ryu was a much scarier threat. Sorry, Leper. But I think that's going to be the real tell is in the mid and top positions. Can Captain Ryu do better against Leper than Vinny can do against Phoenix? I think that's going to be my comparison to see who wins this, and I think it will be close.
So I'm gonna be honest with you. The mid matchup scares the fuck out of me. Scares the fuck out of me. And it's if we're looking at on paper, right? Vinny is definitely what I would argue is to be the mid laner, right?
Absolutely.
The problem that I have from being somebody that's prepping this is Phoenix is the kind of mid laner, kind of like Chinese Spy, where Vinny really struggles.
That's totally fair. I didn't even think about that, but you're right.
Can you expand on that just a little bit?
It's greed versus punish, if that makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have a player that really, really likes to be ahead, plays relatively fast, and really, really likes to control the lane versus someone whose entire champion pool is basically set up to, oh, you stepped up slightly too far, let us kill you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why it's really scary for me.
My biggest worry when I look at the mid laner for Arc, and the reason why I have Vinny favored so heavily, and that's why it's the only reason I think that this game will go to three. This series will go to 3 games, is Phoenix's champ pool. I think he obviously, his Lux is gross. We don't even need to pretend that that's not a point to make when talking about him. But I think his Lissandra left much to be desired, and I think his Veigar was fine. But when Lux, Veigar are the only 2 champs that I was particularly impressed with, I think that Vinny has such a deep pool that Phoenix can start to struggle if he's targeted in the draft.
So I guess for me, and this is the way that I've come into it from looking at what I need to do for this week, right? It's if the top laner for FTD can stay even or merely slightly behind is going to be probably one of the key indicators of how this matchup goes.
Yes, I agree. I think if we're talking in the third person, that this top lane, this unnamed top laner, if this top laner can diffuse the matchup, which is something that we weren't able to see against the other top dog in the group, in Crockpot, is gonna be, if he can, would be a flop in my prediction.
Well, I would also argue that this unnamed top laner went in trying to go man to man with Crockpot and is not going to make that same mistake.
It has learned that he cannot go man to man.
Really fucking bad.
Okay, guys. Let's. Is there any final thoughts on Arc versus FTD before we address our predictions quickly and talk about our highlight matchups?
No, I think that's it.
All right. Well, let's start. How do we want to do this? Do we just want to?
Well, they're there, and we've kind of talked about them all.
Talked about them a little bit, but
yeah.
Can we do this? Can we make you guys with question marks pick somebody?
Oh, I picked one as I talked about it, but
what did you pick?
I had Arc and FTD as the question marks, but thinking back to their matchups against MIT and the bright spots and lack thereof in both matchups, I think that Arc had a much better showing. Obviously, they took a game off, but they looked more competitive. So that's why I decided to go with Arc winning this. But I think it's a really close match of strong sides pitted against weak sides and seeing which one can come on top.
So now that Colonel's done that, Decker, you're just picking on me. That's what you're doing.
Well, to be fair, I can't. I haven't. The slide hasn't updated for me. I don't know if you actually typed it in, but
I haven't typed anything out. One thing I have everyone 2-1 because I think to me this week, I'm honestly looking at things and I feel like there's just a lot of competition. I think that this week there's a lot. The matchups are closer than they've been for a while, except the ones that and the ones I have the question marks on are the two matches that involve the undefeated teams. So MIT versus Rev, I would probably, the logic brain in me, based on everything I'm seeing, would say MIT pulls it out 2-1, right? But I gotta rep my boys a little bit. But no, to me the thing is, I think I would lean towards, if I was gun to my head, who do you think is going to win? Based on precedent so far, it would be MIT. I think MIT has shown a consistency and have competed against a higher caliber collection of teams, where Revolution has mostly been going against SG and Crosspoint. Like that's their most recent competition, right? But I think it's going to be close. I think the game rides on some knife edges, some thin lines that can tip the game one way or the other. Now, if I look on the other side, GSG versus the Fallen, it's a similar thing. I think if I was to, here, I can update it here. If I was to say, if gun to my, or not, no, MIT wins.
MIT wins.
It'd be the Fallen University, just because it's the biggest thing to me, honestly, beyond Bot God, beyond skill sets and stuff. And this kind of goes with both teams, both matchups where I have question marks, is the tempo going into the week or going into the matchup. With the Fallen University and GSG, Fallen are maintaining a high tempo. GSG have hit a bit of a rougher patch, and that combined with precedent 3-0, 1-2, that makes me want to say the Fallen University. But GSG is not a bad team. GSG is a good team. I think they can, at worst, take a game off. At best, win the series.
Will
because the Fallen University
be there?
has shown cracks. What'd you say?
That's a question. Will Bot God be there?
Yeah, that's a big one.
Changes your prediction.
It might.
It might.
I do want to throw one thing out there, and with some of the performance that Revolution has shown in the last week in scrims and in another league, I'm very excited for the energy going into the Revolution MIT matchup. It may go MIT's way, but I think there's going to be energy and tempo and like just aggression from players and healthy aggression, right? Like there's going to be looking for plays. There's going to be some spice in the top lane between that matchup, right? I'm hoping that Zilliq really gets to play his game, and that's exciting to me. I'm really excited for that matchup. I feel I have a hard time saying one team over the other, but
So if I
Under my
can
head.
change speeds a little bit, I am casting this week's game, which is Subversive versus Crosspoint. So I wanted to ask you guys' opinions on why you put your predictions the way you put them, because we seem to be pretty split. I mean, Decker's on the opposite side of the coin here. Decker, why'd you put Crosspoint winning, and why'd you put it as 2-0?
So like I said, like this is such a toss up. A 2-0 does not mean blowout, but I think looking at Crosspoint, showing life last week, I think King of Brawl is a good jungler. I think Ghost Pants or Ghost or whatever we're gonna call them is a good mid laner, and just solo to solo. To me, if I'm looking, it's like Submersive has the top lane advantage. Crosspoint has the jungle advantage. Crosspoint has the mid advantage, and then Subversive has the bot advantage. That's kind of how it works out in my head. And I think with the way that IBS plays, the bot advantage doesn't matter because they're just new. That like for most games, bot lanes just go neutral with.
Oh, did we lose him there?
I think we lost him.
Decker, we lost you, my guy. We can see you and everything. We just can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, it's not good when the guy
and you're back.
when the guy that recording breaks, his stuff breaks. So hopefully, to slowly let me say that again in case we missed it. I think that Crosspoint has the advantage in jungle and mid, and Subversive has the advantage in top and bot. And I think that bot matters less because it is usually so neutral in an IBS game. Like you don't see 2v2 gaps a lot in IBS games. You see it come out in team fights, like the better bot lane can do more in a team fight, but not in a lane. So I think that CK can pull it out because of those things. I think the bot will neutral, and then mid will win, and the jungle will be better at influencing the solo lane to get an advantage top lane.
I've been convinced. Colonel, you're muted, by the way.
Yeah, Colonel, you're very muted.
I've been convinced. Thinking about that, that's a great point. In an IBS, the mid jungle duo can be so impactful and really just especially depending on how draft goes, which I don't really have a lot of. I don't know well enough how these teams draft. Like, I haven't sat down and analyzed the drafts and stuff for these two teams, but I doubt it's great. But just generally speaking, that mid jungle duo can just roll over the bot lane, right? That's it.
Hard to agree.
That's what's going to be.
Colonel, why am I wrong?
I mean, your argument's gotten me questioning, but I do think that Roland has just been performing so well.
He's
think
very good.
He's someone that I've looked to as. It's crazy to say this, but I think he's been one of the top in his role, considering he's on a winless team.
I would give him one of the, like, if we were giving out awards for underrated players, like most underrated, Roland would be in the conversation too.
Oh yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. So I think you've got a point that bot lane matters a bit less, and Snowy Faye winning bot lane was one of my arguments for why they win. But I think Roland difference probably takes them over Crosspoint in my mind.
I would agree with that entirely. Entirely agree with that. I also think that another person in that underrated category is Rhymes.
Oh, interesting.
I do not think that. I think that if we're talking about mid jungle gap, it's about mid laners, not about junglers.
I would disagree. I feel like King of Brawl was somebody that I've had really high expectations of, probably the entire season.
And I'm not trying to sit here and say that King of Brawl is bad or that Rhymes is better. I'm just looking at them more equal, is what I'm getting at. That's all I'm trying to say. So when I look at what favors Crosspoint, I'm looking at it as mid lane favors Crosspoint, not Jungle. I look at Jungle as a point of equality between the two.
I love this conversation, but it's about time for us to wrap this up. I would have to let's go around. Each of us will get to pick our matchup. I have to say, based on this conversation and based on the vibe from this week, for me, Crosspoint versus Subversive. It's the streamed matchup this week, and I have never been more excited to see two teams without a win go up against each other. There's so much riding on this for these two teams. They're both growing so much, and they both have these strengths that I just want to see them just show up, compete, and just beat the shit out of each other and play a great game.
For me, it's going to be CB Rookies versus VBU. I think that is going to be so defining for how the Void shakes out that I am so interested in that match. I need to see that match.
Yeah, I have to.
For me, it's FTD versus Arcquake, and I normally don't talk about my own team, but for me, this matchup is the matchup that is going to determine whether or not I'm full of shit about Shadow Isles being the most competitive group.
Which I've said is not true. I want to go on record again.
And Colonel, what you got?
I have to agree with Decker. I feel like CB Rookies, I've been on the hype train for CB Rookies from the very beginning. Someone go back to week 1. I called this, but it would make me really happy if they could beat VBU, and I think it's probably the closest matchup that we have this week. So I'm expecting both teams to come out the gate running, and I'm very excited to see who wins that match.
Guys, these are some excellent games. Week 3 was exciting. I think week 4 is just amping up the excitement, and things are only going to get more intense as we get into the second round robin and playoffs start to solidify. There's consequences to all these matches this weekend. Good luck to everyone. Thanks, Decker. Thanks, Colonel. Thanks, Leper, for joining me today in Silver Scraps episode 4 of the Spring Split with ZGG. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.